we usually, oh, there it is. Now I see the recording. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's Stephanie and Sara, and we're going to do another episode of Books We've Read. And we've kind of been hiatus for a while, and that's because my computer broke and I didn't have anything that could record me. So, but now I have a new one and we're back. So this theme, which we had been reading months ago, and we've been kind of sitting around with these books, is an adult fiction by an author of color. So I picked a debut novel called The Confessions of Frannie Langton by Sara Collins. And this book was really fabulous. I really enjoyed it. It was difficult, and I'm going to give you definitely an alert on that. They use the N-word a lot, and there's a lot of sexism and racism, misogyny. But this book also takes place in the early 1800s to 1826 on a slave plantation in Jamaica and in London. And the main character is a slave. So I think the author...
Oh, that makes sense.
Yes, the author wanted to use the realistic language that people used in those days, but it was difficult. Some parts I really had to, like, I would read it and then I'd have to put the book down for a couple of days and read like a different book and then go back to it. So I just wanted to let everyone know that, so that's up front. But beyond that, the book was fabulous. I really, really liked it. And I'll tell you, I wrote it down a little bit because I read so many books that kind of mush around in your brain, and then you get the stories confused. Oh my gosh. Anyone who reads a lot definitely knows what I mean.
I had to read my book a little bit to remind myself.
Yes. So this book opens in a prison in London, and it's 1826, and Frannie is being accused of murdering her masters, the George Benham and his wife Marguerite, who's French, and she can't remember anything that happened. And the story kind of unfolds of her life. She's mostly the narrator in the book, but there are some other points in the story where some of the other people seem to narrate a little bit. Frannie was born on a slave plantation in Jamaica. She's half white and she doesn't know who her birth parents are. The plantation is run by this terrible man named Langton, which is where she got her last name, who does horrific experiments on the slaves there in an attempt to prove that Africans are not human. So he's kind of like what Nazis did, basically. Really, and Frannie was taught to read and write and do math and, you know, all that kind of stuff as sort of a bet between her master and this other guy named George Benham, who she was eventually given to and who she's accused of murdering, to see if Africans could actually hold any sort of intelligence, because, you know, they considered them to be not human, and so they weren't sure if they could actually be intelligent, which was kind of disgusting. So then, of course, since she knows how to read and write and do math and all that stuff, and she's actually really smart, she becomes his lab assistant on all of these terrible studies that he does on the slaves that are both on his plantation and ones that he buys specifically just to do experiments on, which include dissections, both when they're live and dead. So it's really horrific. Thankfully, the author doesn't dive deep into like disgusting, horrific details or anything like that. So it's not like a horror book in that sense. So I just wanted to make that clear. So anyway, then her master, I think she's maybe at this point in her late teens, early 20s, brings her to London and gifts her to George Benham, who also believes that Africans are subhuman, but he's not as horrifically violent and disgusting about it. He's more upper level intellectual and writing, you know, papers and whatnot to the other white males who want to keep their superiority and believe that, you know, Africans are there to serve them. So she moves in then with George and Marguerite and their other servants who are all white, who immediately have an issue with her because they don't want to have a non-white person serving in the house. And then there's a bit of a love story, which is really interesting, but I'm not going to tell too much about it because I want to give the story away. But I'm just saying, is it real love if there's a huge power imbalance between the two people that are supposedly in love? And so then the story goes through Franny's whole life and the things that happened to her, including some interesting prostitution, which actually kind of made me laugh more than anything. I actually felt that that was her probably her most empowering and free time in her life, which is interesting. But then she's still in prison, and then you find out what happens, and then that's the end of the story. So sorry, I was kind of vague at the end, but I don't want to give it away because I really want people to read this book. It's a really fantastic book. If you're looking for another book to read, Sarah, I would recommend it. I'm going to check it in today. It'll sit in quarantine for a few days, and then it'll be on the shelf. It's actually a new book.
I'll add it to my stack of books. I always have a stack going at work. I have a stack going at home in multiple places. Yeah, and I'm in the process of getting my second master. So the one class I have to read a minimum of 2 books a week. So I have books around everywhere at all times. The book I did is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. It's technically a YA, but I do want to point out that even though it's YA, I would definitely do the higher end of YA. YA a lot of times starts middle school, depending on the strength of the reader. And it's not that it's not a difficult book to physically read or to understand. It's just the content is a little bit more intense. So I would definitely recommend it like upper high school or adults, even though it is YA. So this is a book about a boy who lives in New York, and his older brother was murdered by a gang. And so I'm going to read you just like this little blurb inside. It says 60 seconds, 7 floors, 3 rules, 1 gun. Will's older brother, Sean, has been shot dead. Will feels a sadness so great he can't explain it. But in his neighborhood, there are 3 rules. Number 1, crying. Don't, no matter what. Number 2, snitching. Don't, no matter what. Number 3, revenge. Do, no matter what. So the whole time is him in the elevator leaving his apartment building. It's written in verse, but it's really feels more like stream of consciousness than it does poetry. Each floor, he meets a different dead person from his life. And he talks with them about what he needs to do. So he knows to revenge his brother, he has to go and murder somebody else. But to go and murder somebody else, that means he's going to be on someone's murder list. So it's a nonstop cycle of violence, which unfortunately in a lot of inner cities happens, especially with gangs. That's why most of the killings happen, is because one person shot somebody, so in revenge, you're going to shoot somebody else. So he's trying to deal with his feelings. His father was murdered. His uncle was murdered. His brother's now been murdered. So he's trying to figure out, like, what do I do? Do I go and revenge my brother and then possibly be murdered myself, or do I try to stop this violence? What should I do? And he has the elevator ride to decide. So that's why, like I said, what?
So the whole book just basically takes place within like a
minute.
few minutes.
Yeah. So it's a very quick read, like I said, because it's in verse. So it's, again, it's not that a younger person can't read it. And maybe it would be good, but I just want you to be aware that it may bring up a lot of emotional turmoil, especially depending on where you live. In Lincoln Park, we don't really have any gangs in Lincoln Park. So that probably won't happen. But it's really interesting to get into the character's brain and see what he's thinking. Like, these are my choices, and neither choice is really very good. So, because if I don't go and murder someone, I'm upsetting my entire family. I'm upsetting everybody around me because I'm not following the rules. But again, your other choice is murder. So it's a lot to take in. It is a quick read. It was very, very good. But just know that it is not as depressing maybe as yours, Stephanie, but it's there is some language in it, not a ton, but there is some language in it. but yeah, so the whole book takes place in that 1-2 minute time frame. So, and all of his books are really good. This is just the one that I happened to pull for this discussion. So
We have that at the library.
we do. This is actually, I pulled it off the shelf to show you. I've had it in my possession for a while because, as Stephanie said, we were going to do this in July, but then computer issues, and now we're finally back, and we're posting this video a little late today, but we finally got you one. Woohoo!
We'll be back in 2 weeks, we promise.
Is it 2 weeks? I don't remember. Let's see. I actually have the calendars printed out in front of me. It's November 19th, actually.
Okay.
So it's closer. We were doing them every 2 weeks, and we decided to do it once a month because it seemed to be a little overwhelming for everybody with trying to read, and yeah. So
That's right. I remember that. Yes, yeah. We started during when we were totally locked down.
Yeah, but now that we are partially open, which if you did not know that, we are partially open. We're open Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays that you can come in and browse, make photocopies. The other days are still curbside. So, and make sure to wear your mask, please.
Yes.
Anything else?
No. So, you know, like us, whatever, comment if you're, and come take these books out, borrow them.
Yeah, I may stop in tomorrow, but I will definitely be there on Saturday. We have a book sale on Saturday. So I'll be returning the book Saturday at the latest.
All right, awesome. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.